Hey everyone, we are back with not the topic we spoke about last week, but a totally different one. It's going to be another unstructured discussion, so bear with us, but we know you enjoy it. As you know, Adam is a passionate PlayStation gamer, and he was saddened by a piece of news from last week. Why don't you fill us in, Adam?
Okay, well, technically it's a rumor at this point, but I mean, it's pretty much likely to occur. Uh, Basically, Sony has decided, or that's what people are saying, to delist all PS3, PSP, and Vita games basically forever. So originally, what they did is they took them off of the online store, and by doing that, you couldn't access your games on those systems except for the store apps on the systems themselves. Well, now it's rumored that they're going to just completely end support for those stores completely, and there's basically no way that you're going to be able to get these games anymore. So if you have a PlayStation 3 or a PSP or a PS Vita, find some way to download all your games now, because in the future you might not be able to get them back. And if there were games that you wanted to play, you're going to have to buy them all up, because otherwise there may be no way to get them in the future. Very sad news.
Look at a few questions about this, Adam. Why do you think Sony decided to do this now?
Honestly, I think it's just a matter of, I don't think there's too much profit in those systems anymore. I mean, occasionally I'll buy something on my Vita, but almost never. And I never buy anything on my PS3 anymore. And PSP and Vita kind of share the same space because you could buy PSP games on the Vita. So I think in that sense that the PSP wasn't too big of a thing. But I think it's really the Vita and the PS3, and PS3 being 2 generations old at this point and not having the backwards compatibility, you just don't have too many people buying those games. And of those games, any kind of multiplayer one probably is essentially dead anyway. So any kind of multiplayer game like a Call of Duty or something like that, you're not going to find anybody to play with. And as far as the Vita, I mean, it just didn't sell that well. So I think it's just costing them money to keep these things up, and it's just a financial decision where it's not it's better for them financially just to cut them off.
Okay, and I mean, the next part is this is sort of a double whammy. What do you expect the reaction will be from Sony fans, and will there be a significant backlash?
I think there's going to be a lot of moaning early on. I think this is one of those things where you're going to be going through the stages of grief, and one of the early ones is going to be denial, and people saying, "Oh, this is a terrible thing. This is a terrible thing." But I think eventually people just kind of are going to get used to it. I mean, it's like when I think it's going to be very similar to when you have a small child and they have their toys and they haven't played with those toys for a long time, and then the parents are going to pack up the toys and give them off to charity, and suddenly the kid's like, "Oh my god, no, these are my toys. I don't want you to get rid of them." And they play with them right now, but eventually they just move on to other stuff anyway. So realistically, I think you might get a small surge of people coming back and buying up certain titles and stuff like that. I know there's a few things that I kind of wanted to pick up on the Vita that I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I should buy it now while I can. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to hurt their bottom line. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to alienate anybody. I think it's just because we see this sort of thing all the time. I mean, nobody's buying SimCity 2000 anymore. Nobody's buying SimCopter, SimAnt. These aren't reliable sources of income for EA, right? And I think this is kind of the same deal where it's just kind of disappearing. And I mean, Disney does this sort of thing all the time with the Disney Vault, where they're like, okay, you can't buy this movie anymore. It's going away for who knows how long. Could be 10 years, 15 years. And people always make a big fuss about it, but look at Disney. It's this huge company. It hasn't really hurt them at all, you know and if anything, it's kind of helped out Disney. So there's always the possibility that with PlayStation they shut this down. If they bring back some of these games later, it's kind of like like for instance, Sega did the Genesis pack or the Mega Drive pack, where they have like what, 35 games or something on a pack. If Sony came out with something like that from the PlayStation era, and it's just like the JRPG pack, and you just get a bunch of JRPGs, you know people are gonna love it, and I think they're gonna forget that they delisted these games in the first place. So I don't think it's a long term problem.
I mean, I mean, with your experience with Sony and I mean, just your overall, experience in this market and industry, do you think there's an easy solution, or what do you think is a probable solution, or will there be a solution, or it'll just be straight delisting?
I think it's just straight up delisting. There's the possibility there now. There has been a patent released by Sony a little while ago to add trophy support to older games, which, if you don't have access to those games, it seems like a strange patent. Now, uh, on the one hand, there's definitely the idea that companies will sometimes file these patents with no intention of actually ever making them work. They just want to have that kind of intellectual property so that other people can't use it in the future. And if it comes up, they don't have to, buy rights from somebody else. So there's a lot of times where people list ideas and they have no intention of ever bringing them to fruition. I'm pretty sure we're never going to get that banana controller that PlayStation recently patented. Um, so in that sense, I mean, it could be nothing. It could just be a way that they're like, okay, if Xbox ends up trying to add, achievement support to older games, we want them to have to buy this kind of patent from us, not, or they have to find their own solution to it. But there is also the possibility that they're working on some kind of emulator, and later on they want to, re-release these games on the PS5 and emulate it in some form. I don't know. I know the PS3 is incredibly hard to emulate because its architecture was very different from pretty much anything else. So I know in that sense it's very difficult to do it with the PS3. The Vita, though, I mean, the PlayStation TV was basically a small mini console version of the Vita. So I think with the Vita and the PSP, it's possible. But also, there are certain games on the PSP, like I've always wanted to play Final Fantasy VII. Was it Crisis Core? But that was only ever released on UMD. It was never released digitally. And because it's on UMD, the only way to play it is on an original PSP.
Do you want to remind some listeners not to know what a UMD actually is?
It's kind of like a little disc built into a cartridge kind of thing. It's I don't remember what it stands for.
Universal Media Disc.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of like a little. It's kind of like its own little hard drive in a way, right? It's got the disc and it spins, and it's it's like a little portable hard drive kind of. But yeah, the only way, there was a licensing problem, and so they couldn't distribute the game digitally. So the only way you can play this game is to have an original PSP, and they haven't been manufacturing these things in a long time. So the only way to get one is to buy one used, and nobody's complaining about that. So yeah.
Okay.
Other than, the random person being like, oh, I really wish I could play this game. But realistically, it's not a problem that they need to worry about.
I mean, do you think they could do this? I mean, move all of this stuff to streaming on the PS Now?
That's also definitely a possibility. The PS Now has a bunch of old PlayStation classics and stuff like that. A lot of the old PlayStation classics that were on the PS3 have been moved to PS Now. So that's also definitely a possibility of just moving all those things over to PS Now and then saying, hey, if you want to play them. And that actually might be part of the strategy to compete with something like Game Pass, is to let's just take all these old games and put them in one place where you can play them. And then, hey, if you want to get them on PlayStation Now. So definitely a possibility.
I mean, that's where like GOG, right? GOG stands for Good Old Games if you've never
Yeah.
used it, and that's where they made their splash. I mean, besides The Witcher and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is GOG sells really, really old games that have been, done up to run in Windows 10 and other operating systems. And I can imagine there's definitely a market. I mean, you would know better for people wanting to play old Vita, PSP, PS3 games.
There's always going to be a market. I don't think the market is quite as big as it is on PC. Because I think on average, PC gamers are older than console gamers. I think PC gamers are typically, the older individuals who can afford these better rigs and that sort of thing. And consoles are typically more for a younger audience. They're less hassle, they're easier to set up and that sort of thing. Plus, I think older generations kind of grew up with PCs, so whereas younger generations grew up with consoles. But there's definitely a market for it. I just think it's kind of a niche market, not a huge one.
Okay. Okay, and with that, from here we're going to go broad. Digital ownership or owning something in the digital sphere has become a more pressing issue in the past few years. Adam and I grew up buying a lot of physical games, but I dare say we have bought far more few digital games in the past few years than physical ones.
Definitely true for me. I really didn't start buying digital downloads until towards the end of the PS3. I did DLC and that sort of thing, for instance, with Fallout 3, but um, yeah, I was still buying up until right at the end of the PS3. I was still buying World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo. I have the box sets of all those, and even The Sims 2, not just the original game, but all the DLC. I have the boxes. So I definitely didn't start moving into digital until really the PS4 was when I really started doing digital. I think I have more physical games on the PS3 than digital games, with the exception of the free games that I've gotten off of PlayStation Plus over the years. So yeah, but definitely now digital is the way to go. I don't have any physical PS5 games. Not that there are that many, but for PS4 games, I probably only have 5 or 6 physical copies. And I have 300 something games in my library. So, yeah.
So your first topic for today?
Okay. So my first topic was there's been some news articles right now, and this is about Sony's delisting of their stuff, and a lot of people are saying, oh, they should preserve these, because people want to play them. And so some people are arguing that Sony has an obligation to preserve their games. That's their responsibility. And I just kind of wonder, is it really their responsibility? Or, first of all, is it anybody's responsibility to preserve these things? Are we obligated to preserve certain things, or are we allowed to let certain things go and die in the past, right? For example, if you have a family photo album, are you obligated? Is it your responsibility to scan them into your computer and put them online for, prosperity? Or, do you have every right just to say, yeah, you know what, I don't want to do this? Now, it's a little bit different in that sense because, we bought games from Sony and that sort of thing. But is the responsibility with Sony, or is it with the publisher? I mean, in a first party game, they're the same thing, right? But if it's a game like, say, Final Fantasy 13, which was made by, Square Enix, is it Sony's responsibility to keep the store alive so that people can buy Final Fantasy 13? Or is it Square Enix? Is it their responsibility to find a way to allow people to play these games? And a lot of the games, like in Final Fantasy 13's case, you can play it on PC. So is it really Sony's obligation to preserve these things or not? And this is one of the things that people have been talking about for a really long time. With when you buy a digital game, you don't own it. You've licensed it. And so technically, because you don't own the game, people have been talking about this for years, about how this is kind of something that could have happened where they just stop offering this game and you just can't access it anymore. And now we're getting to a point where this is happening. And yeah, I don't think they necessarily have an obligation to do that. But yeah, I don't really know. What do you think?
I mean, I'm of two veins of thought. Is I think if you're a game and a game company, and just like in the, I think there's a rule in the GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting practice, which I have had to be reviewing the last few weeks, but that says if a business has to do something that does not present an onerous burden to the business, it should do it if it benefits the client.
Okay.
Now, what's your definition of onerous burden? So, if English is not your first language, onerous burden just means something that has a big weight to it. And I think if you've made money and you're making money in your business, and this does create brand value or intangible value to your company, I think you should do it. That being said, I mean, businesses are businesses. You're supposed to make money, and if this, I mean, if it does, but I mean, servers and data costs are extremely cheap. I mean, the world runs on AWS now, and I think if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, keeping $1 million server running or a $10 million server running, that's developing value for your clients, I mean for your customers, and in some way I think it's something you should just put the money down. It's $10 million is not going to kill you, but yeah. And like you mentioned, I mean, I've kickstarted a few games. A game I really liked was a game called Shardbound, which lasted, I think, including the Kickstarter, all of a year before they were like, nope, this game is not viable, and that was it. I kickstarted it. It was an online card game, and that was the end of Shardbound. And there was another game by the guys who made RuneScape. That was a really cool game, and I loved that. And those guys, I think, after 3 years, stopped developing that, and that was another digital game where I had cards, and it's gone. So I mean, it's terrible, and I do wish there was a way for me to keep that stuff. Even if every now and then I could like click on a digital file and say, hey, these are the cards I had from this game 10 years ago. Sounds weird, but I would want that.
Yeah, there was a game when the Vita first came out. It was called Destiny of Spirits, and I kind of played it, and it was kind of like a Pokemon thing. Basically, it was interesting in that there was a global network, and where you were, you would show up on a map. It had a world map, and there would be spirits in your vicinity, and you could summon these spirits, and then you could use them to fight, other spirits. And basically, it was kind of interesting because they were based on local folklore.
Oh,
So if
cool.
you're here in Taiwan, right? So if you're here in Taiwan, you would get, spirits that looked like, Jiangshi, the hopping vampires, or you might be able to, on occasion find certain spirits that might be from other parts of Asia that were nearby. You might be able to find certain yokai or certain things from Vietnam and that sort of stuff. But what you could do is you could go on and you could trade. So there were certain monsters or spirits that would only show up in North America. There are certain ones that would only show up in Japan. And so it was kind of like a Pokemon type thing, but it was only on the Vita and it wasn't super popular. And after a few months, it kind of went, and this was like an early Pokemon Go, because what you could do is I could sit there at home and then I could drive to work, turn on the Vita, and it would see how far I had traveled since my last login. And
Oh.
it could level things up similar to how Pokemon Go does with your walking.
Oh, so
So
that
this
was
was
like
like
the first geolocation game, right?
there might have been earlier ones, but this was one of the early ones.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really cool. But then they announced, we're just gonna end this game because not that many people play it outside of Japan, and even there it's not super popular, and because just not many that people have Vitas, and it wasn't a PlayStation. I don't think it was a PlayStation first party game, so they ended it. And yeah, it was, if you had spent money in this game, sorry, all this stuff is gone, and it's disappeared, and
Hmm.
uh, but uh, but yeah, in another sense, I mean, say you buy say you bought an N64, right? Or this is one of the problems that the Sega Genesis has. The cartridges have a battery inside. When that battery dies, that cartridge is gone. You can't play that game anymore. So these things have a shelf life. And in a way, digital media, so we've been living with this thing for a long time. And in a way, digital media is kind of, we have this expectation that it should survive forever, but we're kind of used to this idea that things will not last forever. And again, it's okay, maybe it's not super expensive to keep these servers open for the PlayStation 3 and the Vita and that sort of thing, but I mean, really, how much traffic are you getting? How many PlayStation 3 downloads have there been in the last year? Probably less than 1,000. Maybe in the hundreds, but maybe even possibly less. Very few PlayStation 3 downloads in the last year, and so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, it's not that costly for us to keep it open, but really, we're just keeping it open for the sake of keeping it open and nobody's using it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like if you had it's kind of like if you have an arcade in the mall and you have the old cabinets and stuff like that, and it's owned by the mall itself, and it's like, okay, the mall is making money, so it doesn't, this, we can afford to keep this thing open, but nobody ever goes in there.
Sure,
you know
sure.
should we keep it open,
I,
or should we move those resources somewhere else, like what you were saying? If they move those resources, that $10,000 or $10 million into PlayStation Now and supporting them on there or something like that, is that a better use of the money?
I mean, I think it's, I mean, in the mall perspective, the difference is the physical space, right? The physical space.
Right, you can use it for something else, but the monetary space, like, or the server space, we can use these for PlayStation Now. There's still a physical space, and there's still a physical,
But I mean, that physical space
storage unit.
is not limited. I mean, the idea of more server space is just an extra server. It's just, I mean, last time I looked at AWS, it's just a freaking hell. It's a couple of dollars, not even $10 for an extra
Mhm.
Amazon server if you're a premium business client for Amazon, which is what Sony is. Uh,
Right.
yeah, I mean, they're charging them bucks, just 10, 15, $20. Then you pay for your data, and data is exceptionally cheap as well. It's I mean, it's that's the beauty of AWS, is that it's expandable and even automatically expandable without actually having someone to say click and say purchase another server. It's for big clients. It's just when you need extra space, Amazon's web service automatically expands and charges you at the end of the month.
Mm.
So
I
it's
also don't know. Yeah, I
go.
also don't know if keeping these certain titles on the store. Are there certain licensing fees that go into keeping these things on the store and that sort of thing? Do companies have to pay Sony? Does Sony have to pay companies? You know,
That's also a good point as well.
like if we have, say, the Final Fantasy 5, Final Fantasy 6 collection or whatever up on the store, is Sony having, is Squaresoft having to pay Sony every so often to keep these games up? Like, hey, we're going to pay you this, keep them on the servers. Or is Sony, paying Squaresoft something, like, hey, let us continue to sell these? I don't really know. And then, there's always like copyright, you know,
Yes.
times and stuff like that. So, I mean, it might be the time where most of the games that aren't first party would have been, nobody's renewing them, because, like, for instance, if EA Games comes on and they're like, nobody's buying this game. Come on, let's just, why should we pay for it, right? And again, that goes back to whose responsibility is it to preserve these games? Is it the publisher? Is it the distributor? Is it the platform? I don't know if it's really clear for that. Or should we have some sort of government body like the Smithsonian? Some sort of gaming government,
I like your picture,
or
National
nonprofit
Video Game Museum.
Yeah, and that's what they do, is they take these old games and they preserve them, and you can go there and you can play these games. So should we
Yes.
have some sort of organization that's their job, is to preserve these things? Because if it's one of those things where not enough people are buying it, but if you really want to play it, you can go there and get a copy or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like art is preserved, I think, which is been the argument, right? Is video games are art, so video games should be preserved.
Right. Some art's preserved.
Oh, true, true. Some art is preserved. And I mean, this, as we talked about this last week, right, is that, I mean, if you're an indie game, even let's say a medium-sized company, it's very, very easy to put DRM, free executable or installer on your website and say, hey, you can't get this game on Steam or the Epic Store or the PlayStation Store, whatever store, but if you want, you can get it from our website, pay this amount of money, and it's taking up. I mean, let's say in the modern day of games, maybe anywhere from 4 to 20 gigabytes on their server, and they can include that into the price of their data into storage. And then there will be some people, I would imagine, and it's some people who be, it's that feeling of when I'm looking for something and I'm in the mood, I'm like, oh my god, I miss playing. You gave the example of SimCity 2000, and there I can go to this website, Maxis's website. There's no Maxis anymore, but and download SimCity 2000 and say, oh god, I feel so good. Thank you for keeping this around for me.
Yeah, no, that was something that actually was really interesting to me. Was I had always thought that computers were, because computers are backwards compatible forever. They're not. You
Mm.
know, I tried to reinstall SimCopter one time, and it was like, nope, this won't run on your modern systems. You know, this was designed to be used on older processors, and it just won't run properly because these processors are too fast, and or they're 64-bit as opposed to 32-bit or
Yep.
16-bit or whatever. And so yeah, PCs aren't even entirely. That's why a lot of those old games had to use a DOS emulator
Yes.
to run the
Yes.
games.
That's
Um,
GOG's niche is doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I tried to reinstall Sims 2 once, and then on my modern computer, and I realized I couldn't do it. And then it turns out that EA released a Windows 10 compatible version of it, where it
Nice.
was just the full game and it had all the DLC and all that. But yeah, I my old games, it was gone. I had to rebuy it to play it on this modern system, and in theory, you could keep an old PC around forever if you wanted to play these old games, but you have to find ways around it. And so it's kind of the same thing, where I buy this, but the platform itself is gone. PlayStation 3s are dwindling. They're not. There's never going to be more. There's always just going to be less and fewer. So, uh,
True.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing. I mean, in my personal opinion, I would love for them to preserve these things, but at the same time, if I'm being entirely honest with myself, I'm never going back to my PS3.
Oh no,
I'm just not
totally.
going to do it. And so it's kind of like if you can. So it seems like a great gesture to do it, but it's kind of hollow and empty because yeah, and that's why I'm saying I feel like a lot of people are probably going to go through those stages of grief where they're going to say, "Oh no, this is bad. This is horrible. You should preserve these things." And then it's like, "No, please, keep it open." And then eventually, I think it's going to get to acceptance where it's like, honestly, I was never going to go back and turn on my PlayStation 3 anyway. Um,
Totally. I mean,
so
speaking of old stuff, like like you guys have been seeing Adam's trying a lot of different stuff, and we're trying to bring you guys a variety of content. So we usually talk about new games and stuff, and I picked up Evil Genius Simulator 2, which releases today. So I mean, I should probably stream it Friday, but I'm gonna finish. Actually, I will definitely stream it Friday, and but yeah, I have Genius Simulator 1, which I have no idea how I got. But I mean, I looked at it, I'm like, oh my god, this looks god awful. And while, I mean, I'm a Switch gamer, so I mean, I understand games not looking good, but damn, that looks bad. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's just like Adam said, I can't imagine myself playing some of the older games that are in my Steam catalog ever. At that point, I would like to, like when it comes to memories and stuff, I keep I have a folder on my Google Drive for old game screenshots and that sort of stuff. I'd like to keep that. And going back to like digital collectible card games, I'd love to keep card art. I mean, I would like to look at that stuff. Some of the art is just amazing. Uh, yeah.
yeah. I think there's. I think the card game thing is interesting. I noticed you had that. Because yeah, like a physical card game, you can keep them and people collect them, right? Yeah, some people don't even want to play. It's just a collector's item.
Exactly.
Uh, and I know a lot of people did that with digital or with physical media. They collect the games. They liked having the boxes on display. This is something that I told my niece when I got my PS5 because PS5 is compatible with all the PS4 games. So I said, okay, you know what? If because she seemed interested in it, I was like, I'll let you borrow my PS4, but you're borrowing it. You can't have it. So if you ever upgrade to a PS5 or something like that, I want it back because I would like to put it up on my beautiful shelf here behind me and have my little collection of old consoles and that sort of thing.
Definitely.
So I like having that stuff around. So yeah, there's definitely something worth collecting on that. But like with the cards, it's kind of hard too because if you don't have the game, how are you going to view them? You would need some kind of medium for viewing these cards. But I mean, that's the kind of thing where you could just, they could put it up there. You could download it. And it's, you don't have to update it or anything. It's just basically a card viewer app. But yeah. And then I liked your point too here with the NFTs and using those for cards.
Yep.
I think that's a really great idea because I know one of the problems that digital card games have had is like in a physical card game, you can trade cards, but obviously in a lot of these games, like even games like say Borderlands, duping is always a thing.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
with NTFs, you can't really do that, can you?
No, no,
Or
no, because I mean,
NFTs, sorry.
there's one digital certificate of authenticity which is verified on the blockchain, and if you know what blockchain is, let me put that up actually. Where is that? Yeah. So this is a screenshot. This is Bitcoin. Everybody knows Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the idea of a blockchain where if you think of a blockchain as a ledger or an accounting book or a financial statement, but instead of the bank holding it or somebody holding it, everybody has a record of the blockchain on their computer. And everybody of all the transactions, like if you guys probably can't see that very clearly, but this is a screenshot I took of the Bitcoin blockchain, and it shows transactions. And one of the very first transactions is somebody traded 15 Bitcoin for something like 800,000 US dollars, maybe a bit more than that now. But yeah, and you can see this guy's wallet address. This guy made this transaction when the transactions are anonymous, but you do get to see that even with NFTs. And NFTs, again, if you're not in the know, is a non-fungible tokens. So, I mean, the idea is that, there is just this thing. You can't change it. You can alter it. It is just there. And yeah, NFTs are the key. I mean, if you want to learn more about it, I would suggest you listen to the Twit podcast, This Week in Tech. There's a whole bunch of them. You just search for NFTs online. There's a bunch of articles. There's blockchain right now, which do that. There's some game called God Something or the Other, which is built on the Ethereum blockchain, and you are allowed to trade stuff. And there's a farming game called Alice's Life, which I am one of the investors in, actually. So take that with a grain of salt. But that game's built on the blockchain, and there it's sort of like the Animal Crossing slash Stardew Valley, but where actually people own digital land. You can trade land with each other and trade animals and variations of animals and all that sort of stuff, and that can be for real money if you do want to do that. So NFTs are definitely a key, and I definitely think that will help in the future. Uh, if companies are willing to integrate NFTs into their ecosystem.
I think that would be really great for games like if say Warhammer ever went digital, so you can get the figurines and put the NFTs on the figurines and then people can trade them and that sort of thing. I think that would be, because I have a friend and he always thought that the future of those would be something like that, where you would buy a license for a model, and then when we have 3D printers in the future, you could just print the models at home. You don't have to order them online, but you can only print it one time. But yeah, I think if that'd be kind of a similar thing with digital stuff and then trading, and I think that's really cool. And then that also I think is really interesting because you can have things like rarities, where things are intentionally rare. But like real art, they could be destroyed and cease to exist altogether. So that's kind of a worrisome thing on some level, right?
But I mean, how would you destroy an NFT?
You just lose it.
How,
Like the guy who lost his Bitcoin in a USB and it got thrown away.
yes, 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 yes. I mean,
So,
yes, yes.
something like that. Like if you had or like I had my hard drive and my hard drive died.
Yes.
If that happened and then you just can't recover it, it's just gone
So
forever.
that actual copy, yes. But I mean, you could never lose your ownership of it.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
because other people have a record of it.
Yes, yes, yes. So even if you lose that actual copy, and then again, like a lot of NFTs have a certain number of copies. So even if you lost your copy, I think like I was telling you about the waifu stuff, and they usually have like 1 or 15 copies. And so like this actual art piece, there are 15 copies. So even if you lost yours, I'm not sure how that would work though. You could potentially approach another holder and say, hey, could you send me a copy of this? And you could show them your NFT and say, yeah, I actually owned this before. I've lost the physical copy on my hard drive. And yeah, or you could approach the artist because the artist is the one who created it.
Interesting.
Yes, and then that artist can verify it because it's on the blockchain. You just go to a simple blockchain exploring app and say, hey, this wallet address purchased this piece of art on this date for this amount of money. And I mean, that's like your receipt, and it's available forever for anyone to see. Yeah.
So anybody could copy it. It's just you verify that I have a verified copy.
Yes,
Okay.
because that there's all the transactions are listed in the blockchain and they stay there forever, which is why I told Adam the other day. I saw the news that the Bitcoin blockchain is like 100 gigabytes plus. In the Dogecoin, the Dogcoin, I don't know how people want to say that. I
I
prefer
always thought it was
Dogcoin.
Doge.
Oh, people say Doge for some reason. I hear on American podcasts, so
It
I. Uh,
might be Doge. I don't know. I always thought it was Doge. But then I thought the Stadia was the Stadia. So don't trust anything about my pronunciation.
But I like the idea of Dogcoin, so I'm gonna call it Dogcoin. But yeah, I mean that's another huge, because my partner's owner, she wanted Dogcoin, and we ended up buying a little bit of Dogcoin, and that one as well. I think to have a wallet on your computer, and when I started syncing the wallet, because you have to download the entire blockchain, it said something along the lines of 7 weeks to sync on my computer, of leaving my computer
What?
on the whole time, so I could get the entire blockchain on my computer.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it started off as 7 freaking years. I was like, no way. 7 years, I'm gonna be 45. So, no, no, no. So I was like, oh no, we're just gonna use another wallet. We don't need to sync the entire blockchain because that's just a waste of time.
But I mean, once it's synced up, is it always synced up or?
Yeah, yeah. Once it's synced up, it's just sort of
Oh, okay. It's just adding on the new ones. Okay.
exactly, exactly.
You're
It's
just
just
catching up to where it is.
yes, yes.
Oh, okay. So it's not like, oh, I've synced up after 7 years. Now I need to sync up again.
No, no, no. I mean, you'd be a fool to sync up and spend like 6 weeks or 7 weeks syncing up Dogecoin or Dogcoin, and then be like, yeah, I'm gonna switch off my computer and never do that again for another few weeks, and then you just screw yourself in terms of computing time. I mean, it doesn't use up computing resources a lot, so you can just do that, and like while you're working at home or whatever, you can sync it for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day for a long time, and that could work. But that's still a gigantic pain.
Mm. But yeah, that could also work with what you were saying with like, just put the executable files on your website or whatever, and
Mm.
just people download it, and it's like, okay, you have a verified copy of it. And you were saying you were talking to me about in the office about doing that, and then if you have a right to a game, you could just go to anywhere in the blockchain basically and just re-download it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the record is all there,
Yeah.
so why not?
I don't know. That might be a way of the future.
Indeed. So
But oh
yes.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna say, transitioning to the next part.
That's what I say. I was gonna transition to the next part for you. Battleborn and Evolve.
Oh well, I was gonna transport to the other part, but sure, we can go into that. No, Battleborn and Evolve. I was just the reason I wanted to bring up those is because these games were basically already dead on arrival, and we can't play these games anymore. Really, you can still play Evolve, but you I think you can play it locally, but there's almost no point. And I think you could still do peer-to-peer connections if you know who you're connecting to.
Okay.
But Battleborn is dead. There's no way to play it. Absolutely, you know. And that was kind of disappointing to me because when it came out, I really enjoyed Battleborn. I thought it was going to be a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And my friends and I, we were like, hey, we're going to buy Battleborn and we're going to play it. And I bought it and they didn't. And so now, yeah. And so now when my friends are like, hey, let's play a game, I'm like, okay. And I don't buy it until they bought it yet. I used to be like, okay, I'm going to buy it now and I'll be ready for them and it'll be downloaded and stuff. And now I don't buy it until they buy it. For that exact reason is I've, a couple games that I've downloaded and then that happened to me with Battlefront 2. It happened to me with Battleborn. My friends wanted to play Squadrons, and I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting, but yeah. The selling point on these games is the multiplayer aspect, and if you don't have other people, then where's the point in preserving the game?
True.
You know
True.
what
True.
I mean? So say preserving something like Drakengard, which is a single-player game. It's kind of the precursor to or prequel to Nier. Preserving a game like Drakengard, anybody can enjoy it because it's a single-player game. It's designed to be that. But Call of Duty, I don't know, 3 or whatever. I don't know, what are they on now? Battlefield 7 or something.
It's like Call of Duty Warzone and Call of Duty. I looked it up the other day. I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the PlayStation 3 versions of Call of Duty, is anybody going to play that? I don't think so. When I was on the PS3, I loved Killzone 3. I played Killzone 3 all the time, to the point where my wife complained about it. Yeah, so I played that game all the time, and I played it up to the point where I would log in and I would join a game, and it was just me. There's nobody else in the level, and so I'm completing all the objectives, and I can level up relatively quickly because I'm the one completing all the objectives. But it's just there's nobody else there to play with, and at that point, a company could say we can still sell this game, but you're never going to play with anybody. You can just run around alone in this empty field, and in a way is that because, like you said, these companies, they should do something that's good for the customer. But is that really helping the customer if you're like, I'm going to keep this alive, but you're never going to enjoy it? Like, I'm going to allow you to buy it, but yeah, like.
I mean, I think it's like a lot of things companies do just to sort of build. Again, goes back to what I think. I always see it on. I've seen it on spreadsheets and stuff before. I would say spreadsheets on company financial statements. They have a value for the company's brand, and it's an intangible value, but it's a value that they estimate in billions of dollars or millions of dollars. And I think that adds to it. That builds brand loyalty. That. It's like the GOG did I think a wonderful job with Cyberpunk and saying, hey, if you buy this game, this is what we get, and this is the stuff you will get, and we give you extra value because of that. And despite me not, really enjoying Cyberpunk that much towards the end of it, I mean, it was still a fantastic purchase. I got so much really, really cool stuff and art and music and stuff that I actually looked at. And it's stuff that they're hosting on their GOG server, and it's gonna be there forever. I think their Cyberpunk or CD Projekt Red is a rich company, so it's stuff that gives me a connection to the brand. And even if I can't fully enjoy it 5 years later or 6 years later, knowing that I got that benefit or I can still get that benefit, still I think could be worth it to companies.
But that, again, that's a single-player game, not a multiplayer game.
I mean, even if in a multiplayer game, fine, you're right. If I couldn't play it multiplayer, yeah, that would be difficult. I mean, I still think it should be still available, and maybe, tack on a bot. I mean, bots are easy things to add into game. I think you just add a bot mode.
It depends on the game. I mean, if there wasn't one already in it. Like, Killzone 3 actually had a bot mode, so yes. I could have done that. So that was a possibility, but yeah, sometimes if there's not a bot mode, programming it, basically you have to go in, and again, that's spending resources on going back into an old game and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's kind of a philosophical question in a way, and I don't think there's necessarily a correct answer of what's right or wrong. I think it's very much based on people's personal opinions and that sort of thing.
True.
Yeah. So, but what I was gonna say, I don't remember what I was gonna move.
The DVD dinosaur stuff.
No, I was going to move on to, but I mean that one's kind of interesting. I don't even remember what I was going to say anyway. Yeah. Oh well. But we can move on to the DVD dinosaur stuff. So will games go the way of the DVD? So currently, physical games are obviously a lot less popular. We're buying a lot more digital, right? And if you look at DVD sales, not just DVDs in general, but also Blu-ray DVDs, I think they said since the advent of Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and all that, DVD sales have declined by 86%, which is a huge decline. And, people aren't really buying these things as much as they used to, especially because, like, for instance, I know when I was little, we bought a bunch of Pokemon VHS, and I would watch them over and over and over again. We had Babe, the pig movie, on VHS. We watched that all the time. And I know a lot of little kids, they'll watch the same things over and over and over again. But with something like Netflix, like I have a friend who will just put on the Peppa Pig channel, and his son just watches Peppa Pig.
Hmm.
It's just all Peppa Pig all day long. And as we move into streaming, we're not quite at streaming yet, but when we move into streaming games, are we going to see games kind of go the way of uh, the DVD, where people are going to be buying less games and they're going to be, opting into these kind of streaming services or services like Game Pass, and people are just not going to be buying games as much as they used to? I mean, currently, right now, they say your average Game Pass user uses more or spends more money because they still buy games alongside Game Pass. But if we look at Netflix when it was early, people were still buying DVDs. It was just when we started getting into Hulu and Amazon, and so as we start moving into the Amazon Luna, and if Apple ends up opening their thing, and other companies start moving into their kind of streaming services and that sort of thing, like PlayStation Now, and are we going to start seeing is the model of selling games going to be as lucrative, or is it going to be better off for these companies just to create these streaming services? And are we going to see kind of a decline in game sales and seeing people more playing these games on these services? So
It's a very good question. So before I give my opinion, don't forget to email us with your thoughts about that, because that's, I mean, I'm sure you've all thought about it. Middleagedgaming2020@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think. I mean, are you buying less? Are you buying more? Are you subscribing to multiple services? Are you waiting for Amazon Luna to launch in your region? Amazon, I got your invite, but I can't use it. That's not fair.
it's not.
So, I mean, Adam and I, as usual, surprisingly got into this topic a little bit before we started the podcast, which is why we're a little bit late today. But, I mean, I personally think it's people who buy physicals, who are collectors, are going to keep collecting. People who are not collectors are not going to collect. And, I mean, I had a thought for you is, do you think, as, they say, from our parents' generation, people were lives were less busy, and now life has become more busy, so people are trying to simplify, so people try to buy less, and the idea of not having a huge stack of CDs or DVDs or boxes of games in your house, maybe that's appealing on a psychological level, and to say that yes, I get to keep my collection forever. I mean, it's the thing I love about the Apple ecosystem, the Steam ecosystem as well, is that as I upgrade my iPads, as long as the games themselves are compatible with the iOS version, these games I own these games forever. Same thing with Steam. I mean, as long as these games are compatible with whatever operating system comes after Windows 10, these games are with me forever. No matter how many times my computer blows up or I change it or something like that, I think that's wonderful. Physical editions also. I mean, I love the art. I love the extra stuff you could get in them. Like Adam mentioned, he had the Sims 2 original edition.
Yeah, I have all the boxes, but I mean, I don't think you could buy them digitally back then.
Yes, yes, yes. So I think, I mean, to sum it up, my opinion is just people will buy what they want to buy. I think definitely people are going to buy less because I love the fact that I don't have to keep boxes around anymore, and I have like a one of those old CD holders with CD versions of games that I keep, though I'm never going to play because I do not have a CD drive, let alone a DVD drive in my computer.
Yeah, exactly. When we bought a computer, we said we want a DVD drive, and the guy kind of gave us a funny look, like, "Why? Just buy like a USB DVD drive. Why do you want a DVD drive in your computer?" And we're like, "No, we still have a lot of old CDs stuff that we, because like to install, say, Adobe or something like that.
Yes.
So we were like, no, we want it." And the guy was like, "Okay, But yeah, no, a lot of modern PCs don't have DVD drives in them anymore.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I do think that eventually, I do wonder if maybe at some point things like Game Pass or Luna or, you know, xCloud, I guess, or PlayStation Now, are people going to, I do think people will eventually start opting into those more and buying fewer games, especially as right now these services are relatively small. But as they grow, like Netflix, when it started off, people were still buying DVDs because Netflix had a library, but it wasn't super huge. Especially back when they were the renting of the DVDs.
Yeah,
You know,
I remember.
um,
I was living in America then.
right? So people would still buy DVDs.
Yes.
But yeah, now that they've grown super super huge, I mean, how many shows are on Netflix now? I
Jesus.
don't even know. Hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds.
Right,
Yeah.
and I mean, Game Pass has how many games? Like
Oh, Game Pass,
100, maybe
more than 100.
more than 100, but less
Yeah.
than 200, right?
Yeah, I'm not even sure about that now. When I started Game Pass beginning of last year, it was under 100. And now
Yeah,
it's grown exponentially with the inclusion of EA Pass,
yeah. They got
plus
60 new
Microsoft adding
games.
additional titles, plus Bethesda stuff is all on there now as well.
Right. So once these services start getting into the thousands of games, I think that people would. Why would you buy games? you
No,
know,
no, totally.
yeah. There's
We've
totally going
mentioned
to be
that
something in
before.
there. Yeah. So and then at that point, it's kind of and at that point, this whole kind of should PlayStation preserve their games kind of becomes moot because you don't own anything. You're just basically renting access to this library. It's kind of like, why would it's like, imagine you have a library next door. Why would you ever buy a book if you can just go to the library and pick a book of thousands off the shelves and then just return it to the library? Um, and I think that that's kind of where we're going to go, is that you're going to have these giant libraries. And so I think the whole idea of preserving these games in a way is kind of moot because, eventually we won't own anything. Nothing will be ours. It'll all be something that we just pull off of this larger system. Particularly once we get to streaming, because you won't physically have it on your system.
True.
And then specs will, and I think that's advantageous because then I don't have to buy a really nice high-end PC. I just have to buy a card that can stream well enough, right?
Yes, yes,
Um,
exactly.
and so once I think streaming really takes off, I think that, yeah, this won't. So in a way, it's kind of like, okay, it'd be nice if they preserve this, but I think I think it's a nice gesture, but I think in terms of realistically looking into the future, it's not really an issue. You know, I think yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and certainly Ed and I will follow up on this. Like I think we've talked about in previous podcasts, I'm going to be going back to Xbox Game Pass come summer, just to see, just because I'm just really not going to buy too much, and especially if Xbox Game Pass gets that D&D game that I'm really interested in, then that's guaranteed to be. But even then, I might just go with Xbox Game Pass, give it and see what's going to happen in summer, and maybe keep you guys updated at the same time as far as this goes. And Adam, so next week we're talking about games, right?
That's the plan, but that's what we said last week too. So we'll see.
Yes, because then that PlayStation news dropped, and we had to talk about that. And
Yeah, I did.
digital ownership is definitely such a big thing, and NFTs is still raging on
And
today.
as people will tell you, nobody, you never own anything digitally. You license it.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, yeah, I finished Godfell this past weekend with a friend of ours, Hans, and so I'm going to be
Nice.
talking about that and my impressions of Cyberpunk when I finished it in 22 hours, which was disappointing. And
That's short.
yeah, and playing Control as well. And Ben told me last night I'm towards the end of Control as well.
Man, I'm in the like 100 and I don't know, 120 something hours on Valhalla, and I keep thinking I'm at the end, and then it's like, oh no, now this new quest, and I'm like, oh gosh, come on, let me finish this. I don't want this to be another Witcher 3.
And then my brothers and I, we play Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and my younger brother said, "Yeah, we're almost towards the end of Breakpoint." I'm like, Jesus.
Ah man,
Yeah. So
ready to play
we're
a shorter game.
so I mean, we got all those. Then we're trying to figure out what we're gonna play next, and we might give Valheim a go. So, and
Yeah.
you're gonna be talking about Windbound
Yes, Windbound and Haven.
and Haven, and your experiences with Free Fire and Apex
Apex.
and those four, right? So I mean, we're
Yep.
gonna have to go over a lot of stuff very quickly next week.
I think Apex and Free Fire I haven't played too much, and they're kind of in the same vein. So
Oh, sure. But I mean, I'm sure people, especially in our age group, I'm really curious about your experience with Apex because I follow a lot of people on Twitter who play it, and I wanna. It would be nice to try. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's it. And thanks everybody for being here. I mean, we're really happy loads of people stopped in. But as usual, as Adam says, nobody asked us a question. And we're still looking for Twitter and IG on Facebook. Drop us some questions. If you got any thoughts, maybe even send us a link. Say, hey, can you put this on your Facebook page? I'd love to do that instead of putting stuff that I find or maybe Adam's interested in and tagging Adam in. So if you want us to discuss about something, send us a link. We'd love to. You don't even have to write a message. Just here, click, say a link, but please no weird links. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Adam will be streaming tomorrow.
I will, and I'm gonna try to stream Friday. We'll see.
Okay.
We do have a holiday. It is Tomb Sweeping Day, so it
Oh
depends
yes.
on,
But as usual, Adam is crazy busy when it comes to holiday time.
yeah, family stuff's pretty busy.
Yes.
So I'll try to. It is early in the morning. My wife doesn't usually wake up too early, so I'll try to stream, but no guarantees.
Yes.
But I will be streaming tomorrow. So.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
And as usual for me, Thursday, new Hearthstone expansion launches tomorrow. So I'll be doing Hearthstone Thursday, Evil Genius Simulator Friday, and maybe a weekend stream. Maybe. We'll see how much work I have to get done. But thanks very much for watching and listening. And if you're listening on the podcast, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. And we will see you guys next week, Tuesday at the usual time.
Have a lovely evening, morning, or whatever time of day it is.
All right. See everyone next